Hello, everyone, and welcome back to The Pathway, episode 2. Hope you enjoyed the first one. If you did, we're hoping that you gave us a bit of a like and a subscribe. And if you are a fan, please do share it with your soccer friends and family, of course. Glad to be back for the second episode. And we do have a new guest, Michael McCall. So I think I'm going to start with you, Michael. Michael, how's it going? And please give the Pathway a bit of an intro, because I know you're going to be a regular contributor on this as the season unfolds.
Yes, going good out here in Vancouver. Lovely time for playing football as well. I'm the commentator, the play-by-play guy for the BCPL, have been so since the first season back in 2022. And then before that, I was the TSS Rovers commentator as well, back in the old USL2 days, which seems so long ago now.
Well, that's actually a really good segue for the first question, which I do want to throw your way, because it sounds like you've got that background and knowledge of the league. And what I want to really talk about today to kick us off is the show's called The Pathway. So let's talk about the Canadian soccer pathway. And does it feel like to you that the pathway is finally becoming more visible and connected with the rest of the world, more than it was a few years ago, at least?
I think it is, especially here in BC. One of the long time complaints has been years ago, British Columbia produced so many national team players, and then what happened? That stopped. And you look at the Whitecaps over the years, and there was young guys that came through, and they just never made the breakthrough. And now we've got this league, or the two leagues really, underneath the MLS. You've got the CPL, you've got now the PSL, and you're starting to see the pathway. And I think for the clubs, for the players, it's the old thing. If you don't see it, you don't think you can be it. And now, at least here in BC, we're starting to push players on, both in the men and the women's side. There's women's players that have been getting called up for the rise in the NSL the last 2 years. There's been some that's now gone overseas to play in Europe or down in Australia. And on the men's side, locally, we're seeing a really big breakthrough with Vancouver FC and Kean Proctor, who was a standout for TSS the last couple of years, and now looks like he's even established himself as a starter in the CPL. And that's important for the clubs, the players, the fans to actually see this happening. Otherwise, the longer it goes on and you don't start to see that pathway, you start to wonder, is it going to happen, or is it all just talk? But now we're seeing the fruits of that.
And why does having the stronger domestic structure mean for the fans as well? Because obviously we're super excited that the players are getting more of a showcase, but how do you feel that connects back to the fans as well?
I think a lot. As folk might tell, I'm not from these parts originally. I'm originally from Scotland. So we're used to seeing academy players coming through, the homegrowns, and it's like a cliched chant from the fans of he's one of our own. But you do feel a little bit different when you've seen a player come through the pathway. I also do commentary in U Sports for UBC Thunderbirds, and it gives me no greater pleasure to see the players that come through from the youth clubs here into the college game, then into the PSLC, and then push on into the pro game as well. And you kind of feel a little bit more invested in these guys because you've seen their journey. A lot of them, you get to know them, you chat to them, you get to meet their parents. And when they make the breakthrough, I think it almost feels like your own children kind of doing it sometimes, which is a weird thing to say, I guess. But you feel a proudness that you see these players coming through.
Alf, I'm going to go to you for the next bit, which is talking about some of the players that have graduated through the Canadian leagues and now they are nearing the World Cup. So you look at the names: Dane Sinclair, Richie Larea, Alistair Johnson, Tejan Buchanan, Kyle Larin, all of these folks potentially heading to the World Cup right in their home country. What does that say to you about the importance of these leagues as we start to grow the game here?
Well, it means that they're significant because they are they are the method by which many of these players drive forward and carry themselves towards greater heights, whether it be a higher league, whether it be steps towards the national team program at various levels at U17, U20, or into the full senior national team. These are players that distinguish themselves in the old League One Ontario. Some of the names that you mentioned, and obviously now in the PSL sort of framework. And I think many of them have progressed through programs that have been in place for quite a number of years. We know that we know the background of Sigma FC. We know the certainly the long-standing significance of both the Vaughan programs and the Woodbridge programs in the city of Vaughan. And it's not unusual that those are some of the programs that have developed some of the players that have taken that important and significant step towards being members of the Canadian national team program. So I think the longevity of some of these programs and the fact that many of them have a strong coaching fraternity obviously helps to propel some of these players to higher levels of football in this country.
And do you think that this can have some kind of implication on coaches as well? Because obviously we're talking about these players who are now, they're going to the World Cup. A few of these folks have had great careers both in Canada and then beyond. Do you think that coaching some of these folks who then go on to playing at World Cups, playing in Europe in the Champions League, etc., do you think that can also help showcase how good Canadian coaching is?
Oh, undoubtedly. And I think we've seen that progress in certain situations play out as well. Patrice Gheisar is one name that comes up, who moved, from the League One system into the CPL. And achieved, a certain level of success when he was at Halifax Wanderers. And I think that is a pathway. We're talking about, pathways for players. There's a pathway there for coaches as well, certainly, because it allows coaches, both head coaches and assistant coaches, to be able to showcase some of their talents in the way some of their teams are able to navigate, these leagues, whether it be the OPL or the BCPL, the APL, or now the Prairies Premier League coming online as well. So it's as it is true for players, it is also true for coaches that this is in fact a pathway to and higher ambitions, higher levels of play.
Fantastic. Carlisle, I'm going to bring us to the opening few weeks. I think 6-ish games now have been played across most teams in certainly in the Ontario Premier League. Give us your thoughts on some of the early season storylines. What stood out for you most so far?
I think this is going to be a really interesting, I think, the most interesting stretch of the season now, because, in talking to coaches through the first couple weeks, there isn't really a preseason, so to speak. There aren't really exhibition games in the same sense as those higher levels at the professional league that are really formal, friendly matches. It's kind of the first 3, 4, sometimes 5 matches of the season at this level are your preseason. And some of the coaches I talked to, they basically treat it that way, where, there's a lot of players away at school that are coming back. But right now, as we get into the main heart, the main meat of the season, is when a lot of teams just start to feel like they have their full strength roster. Just this past weekend, I was covering a game in Burlington between Scrosoppi. We just talked about Patrice Gheisar there, who wasn't on the sidelines for Scrosoppi, but they didn't need him. They had a comfortable 3-0 win away to Burlington, and they took over top spot in the men's division at the top flight. And we're starting to see teams start to really feel like they have their full strength, that the standings going forward from here are going to start to better reflect the actual competitiveness of the teams. And this is when the storylines of who's going to be fighting for promotion relegation in the Ontario tier system really start to take shape. So it's an exciting time, I think, for coaches. We were just talking about, the first couple of weeks, often a scramble, and that's when you can sort of see which coaches are really well equipped to manage that and make best use of the assets they have available to them. And once they get the real reinforcements, now we can really get to see these teams at full strength.
And anyone particularly surprised you, a team or a player, anyone you want to give a quick shout out to?
Well, I think at this point, in talking to Patrice Gheisar, I chatted with him, even though he wasn't on the sidelines, but Scrosoppi said there weren't a lot of players in terms of in turnover. It's a pretty fresh roster for a team that aren't that far off from winning on League One Ontario at the time a couple of years ago, and have been just maintaining, I think, a standard in seeing those clubs. Woodbridge Strikers also off to a great start, beat Scrosoppi 5-1 already this year. Two teams that were fighting for the title last year. So already I think you're seeing, at least on the men's side in the Ontario's top division, it's going to be another great battle at the top this year between teams that have established themselves year after year in recent years as being the contenders.
And Aizaz, if I may, I think it's encouraging to see how well the expansion club Kingston Sentinels are doing, both on the men's and the women's side in OPL 3. They lead the standings on the men's side. Their women's team is second in OPL 3 standings. I think it's very encouraging to see an expansion club like that doing so well right out of the gate. And I think it's interesting also to note that there seems to be a return to the fore of clubs from Eastern Ontario, particularly Whitby. If you look at Whitby and Pickering, both on the men's and women's side, and then we have Borough FC and Masters, who are Eastern Toronto-based clubs who are doing extremely well. So there seems to be this kind of shift, perhaps from Southwestern Ontario over to Eastern Ontario in terms of the early the early season parallels is what we're seeing in the OPL in particular.
Thank you for that. And Michael, just switching almost the exact same question, but switching gears towards BC. What are some of the biggest stories, developments coming out of the BCPL?
It's a little bit different here than how Carlisle was kind of describing it out east. In the men's division, for example, the top two teams are once again Langley United, last year's champions, and TSS, who had been champions the 3 years prior. Those are two teams that have made sure that they've had their players in from the start. So they haven't really relied on NCAA players coming back from the States or players coming back from out east. And because of that, they've hit the ground flying. Langley just now look unstoppable. 8 wins out of 8. They've got a 5-point lead over TSS. They've played once, and it was a narrow 1-0 victory for Langley. TSS felt they should have had a last-ditch penalty, which would have been a draw and may have really shaken the standings up. But right now for Langley, it's 8 wins out of 8. They're free-flowing. They've only given up 3 goals on the whole season. Actually, I think it's 4 now. They gave up another one at the weekend. And we're already into the second half of the season. It's 8 games of a 14-game season. And it's those two that's battling it out at the top in the men's side. It also looks like it's a 2-horse race in the women's side as well. Another unbeaten team. The Rise Academy are out and running 8-0. And that's another team that doesn't rely on players coming back. It's just players that are already in the academy. The second place team there, 5 points back, are Altitude. And they were last year's champions as well. Now, they are mostly UBC Thunderbirds players. So again, they've had the core. But head coach Jesse Simons has brought back a lot of NCAA players, former Whitecaps players, and they're now starting to come back. So they'll be very strong in the second half of the season. The problem is they lost 3-1 to the Rise in their first meeting. and they dropped 2 points in a game to TSS, so they're 5 points back. And when you look at 6 games to go in both the men and the women's side, you're starting to look at where the leaders may be dropping points, and it's already kind of hard to see where that might happen.
How would you describe the overall growth then so far from the change to BCPL? What's that doing for football culture developing out west? And I know more from the mainstream side, Copa 90 actually did an amazing documentary on Vancouver football, and they were in town for a Vancouver derby. So there's a lot of momentum going on. I also saw an ad away from the Premier Leagues, but I saw an ad for where they're going to be showing the Champions League final this weekend, and it's in a barber shop. So obviously there's a lot of interest in soccer right now in BC. And like, can you describe the role that our league plays in that as well?
Yeah, it's just really awareness growing the game, but given the youth players a proper pathway to the pro game. And the clubs in the BCPL, there is definitely different ways of doing it. Some of the clubs, they're focused on the championship. They really want to be top, and they stack the roster. The advantage that Langley have had this year and that TSS have had in previous years on the men's side is if you're in the Canadian Championship, you're going to get the pick of the best players. And I think a lot of the other clubs know that, and you've got, I mean, Langley are good at doing this as well, particularly on the women's side, but you've got like Unity and Nanaimo and Kamloops who have strong academies, and their focus is on giving their young players minutes. So there is so many teams playing in the BCPL. So we don't have the under-20 league here. There is going to be a new league starting in the fall winter here, which is going to be primarily under-19 players. But right now, if you're a young player, or if you're a club that wants to play your 15, 16, 17-year-olds, you're going in to the main BCPL. So you're going up against teams like Langley that have a lot of players in their mid to late 20s, even into their 30s. So there's a little bit of disparity there. So some of the teams, the results are maybe a little bit skewed, but those are the clubs that are really developing the next crop of players. And they always say you learn more in defeat. And for some of these players, it's been tough. The travel is massive. If you're a Kamloops player or a Nanaimo player, you're going from the island or the interior, and it's a lot of travel. But again, it gets players used to that for going into the pro game. So it really just helps grow and let these young players know, yeah, this is a real pathway now. I can be a professional footballer in this country.
Alf, why is it important that this conversation around Canadian soccer, you know, we're buzzing to have Michael representing BC on the show today. Why is it important that this conversation around Canadian soccer becomes truly national and not just centered on one region?
Well, it's important because players come from so many regions and so many backgrounds that it's significant and important to be able to see the development in each one of the regions, and that's why it's encouraging to see the presence and the establishment of the Alberta Premier League, as well as now the Prairies Premier League, even though they're playing a bit of a shortened season, and they're still sort of determining their identity across Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Northern Ontario. But it's important to be able to see the players from these regions and see how well they do up against opposition. And it was certainly heartening to see a team like Calgary Blizzard coming out of the APL play in their very first Canadian Championship match not too long ago, and to see that those players are not overcome, you know, by the height of that particular tournament. So it's really important, I think, to be able to have a truly national scope. and be able to, identify teams and individual players from across the regions who look to be able to make the next step in their pathway towards the professional game.
If I could add on to Alf's point there too about
Yeah.
just the sense of, I think, not to speak on behalf of, decision makers who have been leading this rebrand and sort of reorientation of how we look at the pathway in this country. 10, 20 years from now, I think the idea is that we want to be looking back at this phase of the sport in this country as a watershed moment. Shifting away from what, there always will be a place for what was, the MLS style academies in Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver, and that's not going to go away. But the way that those are ingrained into a broader national conversation of player development is changing. There's MLS Next Pro. That's probably not going away anytime soon. And that's its own thing, because MLS is its own thing. I think the idea here is creating a Canadian thing. And those academies under those MLS teams will be part of the conversation as well. But in regionalizing it like this, you create academies everywhere. That's the idea, that are all part of a similar pathway. And the broader that reach, the more ingrained it is that wherever you are playing in one of these smaller academies or larger ones, you're part of that same conversation and pathway about the Canadian way to get to the higher levels.
If I can just mention as well, like out here in BC, all 8 clubs have academies, and many of these teams have come from like originally being like a Langley United that's been around for 100 years, and Kamloops United now. So they've all got academies, and I think that is the way forward. And it is something, I know the CPL teams don't have academies, and there's a case to make. Do they need to, when there's all these other academies? Because you look at England, and it's something like 97% of Premier League academy players never go on to play for their team, and many of them never get to play pro at all. And you don't want that in Canada. So I don't think necessarily you need the extra expense from the CPL to have the academies. The more the merrier. But I think if you're getting the teams into the PSL from a strong academy base, that is the way forward. And that's how it's worked here in BC.
Awesome. Well, to wrap it up, I just have one more question, which is all around the fans, and I'm going to throw this to any of you folks, whoever has a thought around it. But what does this mean for the fans? Because obviously we're looking at this specifically through the lens of clubs and players, but also we do want the fans here to connect with soccer even more within their local communities. How are the fans going to be even more benefited from these changes?
Well, we've already said some of the names of players who have graduated from this system as it was. And the idea is that that list is only going to grow. And I don't think there would be a more prouder feeling to have a connection to a community club, and by extension, the players that go through there, and to eventually see them put on a Canada national shirt. What more could you ask for?
Yeah, and I know, like with TSS, their supporters group, the Swan Guardians, they keep a spreadsheet. Any single player that's ever played for them, they follow their career everywhere that they go. And it's like, oh, this player has gone to play in 3rd tier in Norway. So they know all these things. And that's what these community clubs are about, is getting that investment. There's still a lot of work to do around that to get people to come and watch this level of the game and be invested in it. But that's why I've always loved it. Like my team in Scotland are a team called East Fife. So we're in the 3rd tier. We've always been a lower league team. That's the level of football that I'm used to. But you feel part of it. And I think the clubs are doing better. Out east, it's really good. Here, it's been a slow build. And to get from just being like parents and family and friends coming out to watch the players, now we are starting to see supports for these teams. Unity just did their first school series that had over 3,000 or about 3,000 kids over the 2 days. And the hope is that these kids go along and they then become invested in the team. And that's what it's all about.
Yeah, and I think fans take a great sense of pride in the fact that many of the players that did start in the Premier League system have graduated and are doing extremely well at various levels of play that they've moved into, whether it's Dane St. Clair in Major League Soccer, or whether it's Kyle Larin now uh, in the Championship in England. Players that have established themselves, or at least saw a portion of their path come through the Premier League system in Canada and are now competing and certainly thriving in higher levels. That's a tremendous reflection on the communities that they developed from, and certainly a great source of pride for the fans and certainly club supporters from those communities that those players originated from.
Amazing. Well, Alf, Carlisle, Michael, thank you for your thoughts. I know I will be having you all back on at different times, but this was a really cool way to spend episode 2, particularly focusing on BC as well. And right from this segment, we are going to cut to that interview that Charlie did from our team with Patrice Gheisar as well, to actually talk about developing some of those players we spoke about. So that's up next. We hope you enjoyed this segment and looking forward to doing more.
We're joined now on the pathway by Patrice Gheisar from Scrosoppi, who is currently, I believe, in sunny Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Patrice, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us. We bring you on at this time of year, this time of Canadian soccer history, because there's something really exciting coming up in the next few weeks, and that is a World Cup Canada is co-hosting. Let's just kick us off here with a bit about kind of your excitement, what it means to Canada to be hosting an event, and what this can kind of do for the sport at all levels in our country.
Yeah, Charlie, thanks for having me on. Always nice chatting with you. Funny enough, I got to see Dane quite a bit and went to the Inter Miami game. And, obviously in America and Canada, there's such a buzz about this event. And you could see it more on TV with the rosters coming out. So I think it's, a historic event. It's a historic time, given that CPL has been providing, support to grow the game in Canada. Obviously, our national team at its peak with Jesse just resigning. Everything is, knock on wood, I don't want to jinx it, has come together quite nicely. And it's just such a historic time. And it's so exciting to see the World Cup taking place. And how many days we got left? Not many.
I think it's like 16 or something at our current time of recording. It's really not a lot. It might be slightly more than that, but it's not a lot. It's not a lot, that's for sure.
Sure.
But Patrice, you alluded to it there. You mentioned there that you've been hanging out with Dane St. Clair. Not the only one of your former players with Vaughan, who we think might be headed to this World Cup. We'll find out for sure, obviously, on Friday night, which guys are or are not going. But you think of players like Dane St. Clair, like Alistair Johnston. Patrice, how proud are you to see these players, out there in the professional game and about to go to a World Cup with Canada?
Yeah, I mean, proud doesn't say it. Listen, they were at the last World Cup, but I think this is a little bit different, Charlie, because, you get to have your first game at the, city you were born out of, Toronto. Not to say, obviously, the games in Vancouver are going to bring the same amount of excitement, but I'm so proud of how they've grown as individuals and collectively, and I couldn't think of anyone more ready than them, and I'm really excited to see whatever role they have. I'm sure they'll be there and they'll die for the badge and the jersey.
I want to talk a little bit about those two guys, just individually, specifically, and what they were like when you worked with them at Vaughan. You've obviously known Dane for a very long time. Just how special of a player and a goalkeeper is he? And at what point, when you worked with him earlier in his career, did you maybe realize that he had what it took?
Yeah, Dane, funny Charlie, played in the first League One Cup finals at BMO, and he was only 17. Him and Kamal both started the game, and we played back then Sigma, who was pretty much became the foundation for all of Forge. So starting 16, when Dane committed to Maryland and started to show great potential. I mean, we joked about it that Dane's like, he goes back to those days, he was playing like 4 games a week. We threw him in, and like he was playing his own age. He was playing U20s. He was playing back then. You had OSL and League One. So you could see that, one, he had the love for the game, and he had high-end, really, really high-end abilities. And look, when he went to Maryland, he had an up and down first year, up and down second year, and it all came together for him for the third year. But that confidence that he had is really, really rare to find. Really, really rare to find. And with Alistair, Alistair was a player that grew more and more. Alistair is like, it's like building a house that'll never fall, because he did it step by step, and he really took care of himself from going to St. John's, transferring to Wake Forest, and how his pro career has gone, and to believe that he's won the armband for a historic cup in Europe like Celtic. It's unbelievable. But Alistair switched positions. Alistair played in the Canadian Championship with me when we went to play Halifax, and he was fantastic. So to see him there and how he's grown to be the man that he is really exciting. And, if I could say one thing about Alistair too, with him, it was just a hunger that he had. And, he just, he kind of, ate, slept, was obsessed about the sport.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And congratulations to Alistair, by the way. It's been a really big couple of weeks for him at the club level.
Yeah. Right.
We're hoping to have him on the show at some point soon, but he's obviously got bigger things on his mind, I think, at the moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
But just Patrice, thinking back to those at the time League One days when you were at Vaughan, you had these players that have come through the system. You were also coaching against a few of the players that are probably going to be at this World Cup with Canada. A few of the Sigma guys like Larea and Laren.
All of them.
Yeah, tons of these guys have come through this system. Just how important do you think it is that this structure exists in Canada now? It hasn't always existed, but now we're kind of really seeing the fruits of this sort of development pathway, right?
Yeah, you have to have it, because otherwise, how else are these athletes going to get the opportunities that they need to showcase their abilities? And look, it's just not the higher level to notice them there. That's step one. But it's also them learning through mistakes and ups and downs and making mistakes that they get better and better and better. You know what I mean? So like, I think that's integral. And I think if you don't have this, then you're not able to showcase their abilities. And if there is, no CPL, then they can't showcase their abilities to go to MLS. And if there's no MLS, they can't do it to go to. So I think it's just to have the proper steps. And some comes a little bit earlier, some comes a little bit later. But I always talk about it. Alistair's game against Halifax when we were in Canadian Championship was really when you could see, wow, he's ready. And with Dane, it was like when he was 16, So I think it just comes at a different time. And, it's not, I don't think development and pathways are just a straight line. You just have to be constantly provide these young players an opportunity, and, they'll blossom at different times when they're ready.
Yeah, I mean, you would know it better than most people, right? Considering the work you did at Vaughan, the work you're doing now at Scrosoppi. Patrice, now that you're back in this world in the OPL with Scrosoppi, how do you see players that you maybe envision them taking those next steps one day?
For sure, without a doubt. Listen, I mean, Charlie, one, selfishly, Ontario. So, but I'm sure League One is having the same players at BC, and you could see, the league expanding. Right. But more importantly for me in Ontario, I just look at every game. Obviously, I have a great deal of belief in our team and the players we brought in. We're trying to change a little bit of the game model and bring a culture that's always fitted the way I've wanted to do things. But more importantly, every game we play someone, there's someone that I'm like, wow, great ability. And I just hope people take notice. And that's why we need more professional teams. We need more growth, because there's so many players, and it's great to see that.
Yeah, absolutely. There's just such a depth of quality now these days, I think.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Patrice, we'll wrap up here. And again, I appreciate your time. Just with a question about what you got going on right now. Obviously, you're at Scrosoppi this year. You guys, I think the men's first team are in first place, I believe. So tell me a little bit about how excited you are to be with that organization now, and what's going on for you guys at the start of the season.
Yeah, look, when we departed Halifax and we're coming back home, we reviewed the different opportunities, and I thought Scrosoppi, with the foundation they have and what they're trying to do, was really exciting. Right now, as I said, I'm the director of soccer, so I'm also helping out with all the youth teams, and in any way that I could support our younger coaches. We have a lot of good coaches that are young and ambitious. I'm trying to focus on the League One, obviously, to do well. But part of that balancing act is also making sure all of our youth teams are going to be the teams that will create the next Alistair and Dane. That my ambition that I had at Vaughan is the exact same here, right? And I think I'm really excited, Charlie, equally about our women's program, something that I didn't do much in the past. And our League One women's had a really good start. They're top 4, top 5 right now. And, we have 4 players. Yeah, we have 4 or 5 players that are 08 or younger. So we're one of the youngest teams in the league. So, and look, by the way, we also just moved up in the Premier. So it's a little bit of, aches and pains, but we're really an exciting team, and we are bringing that same culture and philosophy. And I really hope that my bigger ambition of doing it is not only creating, the next Dane St. Clair and Alistair Johnston, but doing the same for the female game and bringing, the next female star that'll be able to get out, especially with the NSLs there. So I'm really looking forward to that as well.
Absolutely, Patrice. I think we've got a bit of a recurring theme on this show, because on the last one we had a Scrosoppi alumnus in Thomas Skublak on. Now we've got yourself. But anyway, Patrice, we really appreciate you giving us the time, and the best of luck.
Anytime, Charlie. Thanks for doing this. We appreciate it. And as I said, the league grows, but all of this stuff is just so important to bring exposure to all these young players. And, Thomas is an interesting one, because look at him, he was out of it and he never quit. So I'm really happy for him as well. And players like that exist in this country and in a lot of places, and hopefully they'll continue to get those chances. So thank you for bringing exposure to them.
100%.
Fantastic interview there to round us off today. It was a shorter show in terms of segments this time. We had the roundtable and then the interview you just heard, but we wanted to keep it super focused for episode 2, because these are the conversations that matter right now, particularly as we dawn on this new chapter, and, from local clubs and local leagues all the way to players potentially representing Canada at the World Cup. There's a full ecosystem connection going on right now, and we really wanted to focus on that. So huge thank you to everyone who was on the show, and also, of course, a huge thank you to you for watching. You know what to do on the YouTube, of course. We can only grow the show from that support as well. So please like, subscribe, share. We'll have the next one in and around 2 weeks, which is going to be a really special week for not just world soccer, but Canadian soccer as well. So excited to see you then. And for now, please keep watching The Pathway. Speak to you soon.